It was just past midnight when Jon Jones stopped his car at a red light on the corner of 7th and Braxton. Rain fell in thin silver lines against the windshield, blurring the city lights into a dreamlike haze. He tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, absent-mindedly humming the melody of a song from high school, one he hadn't thought of in years. That's when he saw him. On the sidewalk to his left, huddled beneath a flickering street lamp, was a man wrapped in layers of tattered clothing, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps." God bless. But it wasn't the sign that caught Jon's attention, it was the eyes. Even through the grime, even through the years, he knew those eyes. Marcus? He didn't even realize he'd said it aloud. The light turned green, and horns blared behind him, but Jon didn't move. He stared at the man, heart pounding, throat suddenly dry. Could it really be Marcus Dale? The kid who used to race him down Oak Ridge Hill on rusted BMX bikes? The boy who slept over at his house every weekend? Who cried when Jon's mum moved them across the state line in 9th grade? Jon pulled over, hazards blinking. He got out, barely feeling the rain soak his blazer. As he approached, the man looked up, and the moment their eyes met, time folded in on itself. "Marcus, it's me, Jon." The man blinked slowly, as if seeing through water, then tilted his head. A strange smile tugged at his lips, one part recognition, one part disbelief. "Johnny boy." And just like that, the past came rushing back. Bonfires and bike rides, secret handshakes and promises of brotherhood forever. But here they were, 2 decades later, one standing in the cold night in a $1,000 suit, the other half drowned under the weight of the world. Before we go any further, take a second to hit that subscribe button if you're not already. Part of the journey. This story, it's not what you think. Trust me, you'll want to follow along to the end, like, share, and buckle in. Because what Jon is about to discover, it's going to haunt him for the rest of his life. Marcus. What happened to you, man? Jon's voice cracked with genuine shock. Marcus laughed, soft, bitter, and hollow. Same thing that happens to everyone who makes the wrong deal at the right time. Jon stood frozen. He hadn't seen Marcus in nearly 18 years. After his family moved away, they lost touch, as childhood friendships often do. There were no social media updates, no run-ins at high school reunions. It was like Marcus had vanished. Now here he was, homeless, disheveled, and saying things that made no sense. "Come on," Jon said, already moving toward his car. "You can't stay out here. Let me get you a hotel, a meal, anything." But Marcus didn't move. His eyes darkened like clouds crossing the sun. "You don't get it, Jon. I can't go with you. I'm not safe around people anymore." "What are you talking about?" "I see things," Marcus whispered. "Things I shouldn't. They follow me." They didn't whisper. Jon felt a chill crawl down his spine that had nothing to do with the rain. This wasn't the Marcus he remembered. But underneath the dirt and madness, he could still see the boy who once taught him how to whistle with 2 fingers and promised they'd climb Everest one day. "Then at least let me get you some food," Jon offered. Reluctantly, Marcus nodded. They sat in a booth at a 24-hour diner a few blocks away. Marcus devoured the burger and fries like a starving animal, while Jon watched, questions swirling in his mind. Finally he spoke. "Where have you been all this time?" Marcus wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." "Try me." Marcus looked around, leaned in close, and said, "I died. Twice." Jon blinked. "What?" "I OD'd. First time was in a shelter in Detroit. They brought me back. Second time was worse. I was out for 6 minutes. They said I had no pulse, but I remember everything. Marcus, I saw something on the other side, Jon. Something real, something terrible, and it came back with me." Jon opened his mouth, then closed it. "How do you respond to that?" Marcus pulled a crumpled photograph from his pocket and slid it across the table. Jon picked it up. It was a blurry image of 3 boys, himself, Marcus, and a third kid he didn't immediately recognize. "That's Denny," Marcus said. "Remember him?" Jon's stomach dropped. "Denny Traeger," Marcus nodded. "He disappeared junior. Yeah, remember?" Of course Jon remembered. Denny had vanished without a trace. It had rocked their school. Posters went up. Candlelight vigils were held. But no one ever found him. Eventually people stopped talking. Life moved on. He didn't run away, Marcus whispered. He was taken, and I think whatever took him is after me now. John stared, the photograph trembling slightly in his hands. Marcus continued, It started after we played. That stupid game. Remember the one Denny found in the attic? The one with the symbols? John frowned. The Book of Whispers? He hadn't thought of that name in years. It was a creepy, handwritten thing Denny brought to a sleepover once. A game with chance, riddles and rituals. They thought it was a joke. Just kids being dramatic in the dark. But they played it anyway. That wasn't a game, Marcus said. It was a door and we opened it. John tried to laugh it off, but the look in Marcus's eyes stopped him cold. You have to remember, John, Marcus said urgently. After. That night Denny changed. He kept saying he saw a man in the corner of his room, said it had no face. A wave of nausea hit John. Memories long buried clawed their way to the surface. He did remember. Denny waking them up at 3 a.m., crying about shadows, the weird bruises. The screams in the middle of the night, we forgot, John whispered. No, Marcus corrected. We blocked it out. They sat in silence for a long time, the rain tapping gently on the windows. Finally, John said, So what now? I've been trying to undo it, Marcus said, but every time I think I'm close, something goes wrong. People around me disappear, or worse. John felt torn. He wanted to help. But he also felt the pull of his structured life, his job, his fiancée, his clean, well-lit world. Still, he couldn't leave Marcus like this. You can stay with me, just for a few days. Marcus hesitated. You sure? Of course. But as John drove Marcus back to his apartment, a shadow moved across the street behind them. A figure, impossibly tall and thin, whose head tilted unnaturally as it watched them disappear into the night. John hadn't expected the silence to be this loud. After bringing Marcus into his apartment, a sleek, cold space wrapped in glass and expensive quiet, he thought the sounds of the city below would drown out the weight of memory, but they didn't. The door had barely clicked shut when something unseen passed between them. Not a word, not a glance, but a pressure, heavy and hollow like something had followed them in. Marcus walked down the hall with slow, dragging steps, saying nothing, and John pointed toward the guest room, mumbling something about clean towels, clothes that probably wouldn't fit, and how the bathroom light flickered sometimes, but he never got around to fixing it. Marcus nodded like it was the most he could absorb, disappeared into the room, and left John standing alone in the quiet. He poured a drink, whiskey with more burn than flavor, and stared out at the skyline like the answer to all of this might be blinking in neon on one of those downtown billboards. He didn't want to Google Denny's name, didn't want to look up Book of Whispers or cross-reference missing persons from 2001. He wasn't ready to confirm that what Marcus had said was real, because if it was, if even a sliver of it was true, then everything he thought he knew about the past, about himself, about that night, was a lie. Hours passed. He dozed off on the couch with the TV on mute, then woke up just after 3 in the morning to a sound he couldn't place. It wasn't loud. It wasn't threatening. It was soft, rhythmic, a tap, then another, like fingernails drumming slowly against glass. John sat up, blinking in the dark. The only light in the room was the distant haze from the city. He waited, holding his breath. Nothing. Then tap, tap, tap. He got up and walked toward the balcony, eyes scanning the shadows. Rain slid down the glass, but there was no one outside, no shapes, no movement. Just as he started to turn back, he heard it, a whisper, so faint he thought it came from inside his own head. His name, not shouted, not spoken, breathed. He turned. The hallway was empty, the door to the guest room slightly ajar. "Marcus," he called. No answer. He walked forward, pushed open the door. The room was untouched, the bed perfectly made, the towels still folded. Marcus was gone. Panic wrapped around John's ribs and squeezed. He checked the door, still locked, deadbolt in place. He ran to the hallway, nothing. Elevator hadn't moved, he was alone. And then he saw it. The photo. The one Marcus had shown him earlier. It was on the floor by the door, and when John picked, His blood went cold. Denny wasn't in it anymore, just him and Marcus. The space where Denny once stood was blank, as if he had never existed, as if the memory itself had been edited. Jon stared at it, disbelieving, when his phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A text from an unknown number. It read, "Do you remember what you said that night?" Jon froze. Another message followed. 3 shadows, 3 promises, 1 never kept. He dropped the phone. It skidded across the tile. He backed away, every hair on his neck standing up, a taste of metal in his mouth. And then the door unlocked. The deadbolt turned by itself. The door opened slowly. Rain blew in with the figure standing there. It was Marcus. Soaking wet, pale as bone, eyes wide but unfocused. "I went outside," he said in a flat voice. "I had to." Jon stared at him. "The door was locked. You weren't here. Where the hell did you go?" Marcus blinked, slow and heavy, like someone half asleep. "I didn't use the door," he said. "I woke up in the alley. Again." Jon didn't know what to say. Didn't know if this was a breakdown, a flashback, or something else entirely. "What's happening to you?" he asked. Marcus closed the door behind him. "I think it's starting," he said. "What is?" "The thing that took Denny. It's coming for us now." The words hung in the air like fog, thick and impossible to see through. They sat in the living room for hours, barely speaking. Marcus explained the voices, the whispers that had never left him since the night in the attic. He said he tried everything, drugs, therapy, disappearing into the streets. But the voices followed. The Book of Whispers wasn't a story, he said. It was a promise, a pact between 3 boys and something ancient, something that lived in places people forgot. "You remember the rhyme?" Marcus asked suddenly. Jon closed his eyes. Somewhere deep beyond logic or memory, it surfaced. 1 for silence, 2 for sight, 3 for shadows in the night. "That's it," Marcus said. "We said it, all 3 of us, but Denny, he didn't mean it. He lied. He was scared. That's why it took him." "Took him where?" Jon asked. Marcus looked at him, and there was something hollow in his eyes, where broken promises go. The next day, Jon called out of work and started making phone calls. He found Denny's old house, called the number listed. An elderly voice answered. "Mrs. Traeger?" Jon asked. "This is Jon Jones. I was friends with your son." There was a pause. "I remember you," she said. "You had kind eyes." Jon hesitated. "I was wondering if you ever got answers about what happened to him." She was silent for a long moment. "They told me to stop asking," she said finally. "Who did?" "Men in dark suits. No names, no badges, just said the case was closed, that the trail went cold. That looking deeper wouldn't help anyone." Jon swallowed. "Was there anything strange about Denny before he vanished?" Her voice dropped. "He said something lived in the walls, something that watched him while he slept." Jon hung up and stared at the ceiling. Every part of this was becoming harder to deny. That night, Marcus asked him to try something. "We need to remember," he said. They lit candles, drew a circle with salt, placed a mirror in the center, sat on opposite sides. "This is a recall ritual," Marcus said. "If your mind locked something away, this'll force it out." He whispered the rhyme again, and then Jon saw it, the attic, that night. The 3 of them in a circle. The book between them, the pages breathing like they were alive. But there was someone else. A 4th figure, tall, featureless, standing behind Denny, and Denny, eyes wide, whispering something different than the rhyme, a name, not part of the game, a plea. And then the light went out. Jon jolted back, breath shallow, heart racing. "There was something else there," he said. "I never remembered it before, not until now." Marcus looked at him. "That's what I've been running from, but it's too late now." Jon stood. "We have to go back," he said. "Back to Oak Ridge." Marcus's face went pale. "That's where it began. It'll be stronger there." Jon picked up the photo again. Now only one boy remained. Himself. "We don't have a choice," he said. They packed before sunrise and left the city behind. Neither of them looked back. They drove in silence for hours. the highway stretching out like a scar through the fields of their forgotten youth, the rising sun casting long golden shadows over the land that hadn't changed much even if they had. Oak Ridge appeared on the horizon not with fanfare or nostalgia, but with a quiet sense of dread, like the town itself remembered what they had done. John gripped the wheel tighter as familiar landmarks passed by. Hollow Creek Bridge, the old Miller's gas station now boarded up, the faded sign for Green Hollow Elementary School swinging lazily in the breeze. Marcus hadn't spoken since they left the city, but John could feel his tension, the way his fingers tapped unconsciously against the armrest, the way his eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror like something might be following them just beyond the visible world. "We should go straight there," John finally said. "The house." Marcus didn't answer. He just nodded slowly, like the idea hurt, but not as much as pretending it didn't exist. The old Traeger house stood exactly as John remembered, peeling. Paint, shutters hanging crooked, the entire front porch sagging like it had given up holding itself together decades ago. It was abandoned now, of course, had been ever since Denny disappeared. No one wanted to buy the place. Locals said it was haunted, that you could hear a boy crying from the attic some nights, that animals avoided the property, that strange lights flickered in the windows when the moon was full. "It looks smaller," John muttered as they stepped out of the car. "Everything does," Marcus replied. "They didn't break in. They didn't have to." The front door was unlocked, hanging slightly ajar as if the house had been expecting them. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. Every floorboard creaked underfoot. Every step echoed like a warning. But they didn't stop. They moved, in silence through the empty hallways, until they reached the narrow staircase that led to the attic door. John's breath caught. The last time he climbed these steps, he was a boy. That night, that game, that pact. Marcus went first. The attic was just as they had left it, almost. The circle was still faintly visible on the wooden floor, a ghostly imprint of the salt they'd poured decades earlier. But now in the corner sat something new, a chair, a mirror, and a notebook. Marcus stepped forward slowly, picked up the notebook with trembling hands. "It's his handwriting," he whispered. John looked over his shoulder. Inside were pages filled with strange symbols, sketches of shadowy figures, fragmented sentences like, "He waits beneath," and "We let him in." But one line was repeated over and over in shaky, desperate scrawl. "I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it. I didn't want to say it." John felt a chill snake down his spine. "What did he say?" he asked. Marcus turned the page. At the bottom, in large, ink-blotted letters, was a name. Not one John recognized, not human. Something that felt wrong just reading it. "This is what he whispered that night," Marcus said. "Not the rhyme. This." Suddenly the attic light flickered. Even though there hadn't been power in the house for years, a low creaking echoed from below. "We're not alone," John said, backing toward the door. But when they turned, it wasn't there anymore. The stairs were gone, just a wall, solid, old, as if they'd never been a way out. The air grew colder. The mirror in the corner began to fog from the inside. And then a shadow moved within it. Not a reflection, a presence. Marcus stepped back, eyes wide. "It's him," he whispered. "It's Denny." The mirror pulsed like a heartbeat. John stepped forward, drawn to it despite every instinct screaming at him to run. Inside, the figure took shape. A boy, frozen at the age he vanished, eyes hollow, mouth moving, but no sound coming out. "He's trying to say something," John said. He leaned in closer. The attic blurred around him. The dust faded. The floor dissolved. For a second, he was there again. 12 years old. Candlelight. The circle. The pact. And Denny, sweating, panicked, whispering something under his breath, something no one else heard. The others repeated the rhyme, but Denny's voice was different. It wasn't a chant. It was a name, a summoning. John snapped back to the present as the mirror cracked. A spiderweb of fractures snaked across the glass, and from within the cracks a voice escaped, dry and ancient. "One left," it rasped. "One truth." The mirror exploded outward, sending shards flying across the room. Jon ducked, shielding, his face, heart pounding in his chest. When he looked up, Marcus was gone. "Marcus!" he shouted, spinning in place. But the attic was empty. No door, no stairs, no exit. Only the broken mirror and the notebook now open to a blank page. Except it wasn't blank. New ink bled into it as Jon watched. Letters forming slowly, as if written by an invisible hand. "He is inside the one who remembers." Jon backed away, heart racing. What did that mean? Him, Marcus, someone else? The air grew heavier, and the walls seemed to lean in, pressing closer, suffocating. He slammed his fist against the wall where the stairs had been, over and over until the plaster cracked, until his knuckles bled, until, suddenly, the wall gave way. He fell through into darkness, landing hard on cold concrete. Blinking, dazed, he sat up and realized he was no longer in the attic. He was underground, a basement, no, something deeper, older. He stood slowly, every part of his body aching, and saw ahead of him a tunnel, carved not by tools, but by something else. Something alive. And at the end of that tunnel, faint, flickering, was a light, and a voice, distant, familiar, calling. His name. Jon moved through the tunnel like a man chasing his own shadow, each step echoing with a hollow finality that told him he wasn't walking toward something, he was being pulled. The walls pulsed slightly as if the stone itself breathed, and the light ahead flickered with an irregular rhythm, not mechanical but organic, like the blinking of an enormous, sleeping eye. He didn't call out again. Something about the air told him not to speak, not to disturb whatever ancient hush had settled into this place. The further he went, the more the passage changed. Stone became bone, walls grew slick, and the faint smell of rot hung in the air, like a memory that refused to fade. And then the tunnel opened. A vast chamber stretched out before him, carved into impossible shapes, angles that hurt to look at, spirals that led nowhere, stairways that bent into themselves. In the center, bound by chains of light and shadow, was Marcus, or what was left of him. His body hovered inches above the ground, arms outstretched, eyes wide open but unfocused. Around him swirled faint whispers, no words, just intent. Accusation. Grief. Rage. Jon rushed forward, but invisible force stopped him short. The ground beneath his feet cracked, and from those cracks, hands emerged, not solid, not human, just outlines of things once alive, now forgotten. They didn't grab him. They pointed, past Marcus toward the far end of the chamber, where something began to rise, slowly, deliberately, a shape, not tall, not monstrous, a boy, 12 years old, wearing the same red hoodie Denny wore the night. He vanished. "You came back," the thing said in Denny's voice, but it wasn't him. The smile was wrong, too wide, too sharp. The eyes were hollow voids that shimmered with things Jon couldn't name. "I've been waiting." Jon stepped forward. "Where is Marcus?" The thing that wore Denny's shape cocked its head. "Inside, like he wanted, like you will." Jon shook his head. "I never wanted any of this. We were just kids." "And kids make promises," it hissed. "But one broke his, so one paid. Now two remain. You brought him back here. You opened the path. You remember now." And Jon did. All of it. The attic, the book, the voice in the dark that offered them. Protection, power, secrets. But the price was silence. They weren't supposed to speak of it, not ever, not to anyone, and Jon had. That night, just after the ritual, terrified by what they'd seen, he'd whispered the story to his mother. He'd broken the pact. Denny disappeared days later. Marcus spiraled into madness, and Jon forgot, buried it so deep that it rewrote his memories. But the thing remembered. It had waited, watched. "Why now?" Jon asked, his voice breaking. "Why bring us back?" The thing's smile faded. "Because I am not complete. 3 shadows, 3 promises, 1 broken, 1 fled, 1 forgot. Now I'll return. Now I become." It stepped forward. The chamber darkened, and behind Jon the hands began to rise, not reaching for him, but saluting, worshipping, accepting. You were never victims, the voice said. You were vessels. Jon dropped to his knees. Take me, he whispered. Let him go. Let Marcus go. But the thing laughed, a sound like a knife dragged across bone. He's not a prisoner. He's a host. He said my name willingly. He's the one who called me first. The chains around Marcus began to dissolve, and he fell to the floor with a hollow thud. His eyes opened. Not Marcus's eyes anymore. They were black, empty, ancient. Jon, he said, but the voice wasn't his. Join me. Jon shook his head, crawling backward, but the hands reached out now, gently pulling him to his feet. You're not real, he said. This isn't happening. But it was. Every memory he'd buried crashed over him like a wave. Every choice, every word, every moment that led to this. I made a mistake, Jon whispered. I was scared. I didn't know what we were doing. The boy's shape flickered, glitching, like a broken signal. You will remember, it said, and when you do, you will become. The chamber spun. Light erupted. And then, silence. Blackness. Nothing. Jon awoke in his apartment, sitting upright on his couch, drenched in sweat. Morning sunlight spilled across the floor. His phone buzzed on the table. A message from Marcus. Did you dream it too? Jon stared at the screen. A knock came at the door. He stood slowly, opened it. Marcus stood there, whole, awake, confused. I don't remember how I got here, he said. Do you? Jon didn't answer. Behind Marcus, down the hallway, a shadow flickered briefly and disappeared. And in the kitchen, the mirror above the sink showed a third reflection that didn't belong to either of them. They sat in silence, for hours, the same silence that used to live between them back when they were kids, hiding secrets too heavy for their age. Jon poured 2 cups of coffee, but only one was touched. Marcus just stared at the mirror, the one above the sink, the one that had shown something that wasn't there a moment before and might not be again. I don't remember getting out of the house, Marcus finally said, his voice low, shaky. Last thing I remember was the notebook, then that thing in the mirror. Jon nodded. He wasn't ready to talk about what he saw, not yet, maybe not ever. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every time his eyes closed, he was back there, in the attic, in the tunnel, in the chamber that pulsed like a living wound. And Denny, no, the thing wearing Denny, whispering truths Jon didn't want to understand. The apartment felt wrong. Now, not haunted exactly, but rewritten. Like a stage after the final act, props reset but forever stained. The books on his shelf were the same, but one of them wasn't. A worn leather journal sat between volumes of philosophy and law. He hadn't seen it before. He didn't remember owning it. But when he pulled it out, his hands trembled with recognition. It was the same one from the attic. Only now the pages were blank, except for one in the very center. A single sentence, written in that same frantic scrawl. Truth remembers what fear forgets. Marcus stood behind him now. We have to go back. Jon turned slowly. You want to die? Marcus shook his head. I want to end it. Before it ends us. Before it spreads. Spreads? Jon asked, but the answer came in a sudden knock at the door. They froze. No one was expected. Jon stepped to the peephole. An elderly woman stood there, pale, wrinkled, eyes wide with a strange, brittle clarity. I know what you boys did, she said before he even opened the door. I was there that night. Jon opened it slowly. Mrs. Renner? He asked. She had been the neighbor across the street when they were kids, always watching from her porch, always frowning. But she had moved away years ago. Hadn't she? You brought it back, she said. It took my boy first, before yours. You think Denny was the beginning, but he was just next in line. The house feeds on memory, on guilt. That attic is a mouth and you opened it again. What are you talking about? Marcus asked. But Jon already knew, not with words, with a feeling in his spine, like a wire being pulled tight. How? Do we stop it? He asked. You don't, she said simply. You survive it if you're lucky, if you remember the right things. The truth is buried in the forgetting. That's why it hides in mirrors, in dreams, in stories you tell yourself to stay sane. She handed him a photograph, a group of children, not just John, Marcus and Denny, but others, 6 of them in total, in front of the Traeger house. Some he didn't recognize, one he almost did. "That's not possible," John whispered. "That's me, but I wasn't there yet." "You've been there before," she said. "More than once. We all have. That house isn't a place. It's a wound, and wounds don't heal if you keep scratching them." She turned and walked away, leaving the air thick with something colder than dread. Marcus picked up the photo, staring at one of the faces. "That kid. I remember him. His name was Eli. He disappeared the year before Denny." John took the photo back. His fingers traced over each face. If the house has taken others, maybe there's a pattern, a reason, a way to predict who's next. Marcus paced. "We need records, old town files, school archives, something that connects all of them." John agreed. They drove to the town hall, which was barely more than a few rooms, and a clerk who clearly hadn't seen this much interest. In public records since Nixon. In the dusty basement they found stacks of files, missing children reports, property deeds, archived newspaper clippings. Piece by piece, a map began to emerge. Every child had lived on the same street at some point. Every child had attended the same school, and all had been part of a small, undocumented counseling group led by one man, Dr. Leighton Traeger, the original owner of the house. "He wasn't just some shrink," Marcus muttered. "Look at this." A photo showed a man with sunken eyes, long fingers, and a grin that didn't match his eyes. He started that group after his son died, said he was helping kids with trauma. But no reports were ever filed, no therapy notes, nothing. John leaned back, connecting dots that refused to stay still. What if the house isn't haunted because of what we did? What if it was already alive, and he was feeding it? Marcus looked sick. Feeding it kids? Memories, John corrected. Pain, guilt. That's what it feeds on. That's what links all of us. A dusty notebook fell off a shelf suddenly, hitting the floor with a sound louder than it should have been. Marcus picked it up and opened to a random page. One sentence repeated over and over. "If it knows you remember, it can follow." They froze. John's phone buzzed. A new message, no number, just one word: "Run." John didn't ask who sent the message. He didn't need to. The way his skin tightened, the way the air shifted, he already knew. Something had been watching them ever since the tunnel, ever since the moment they began to remember. They left the town hall without speaking, eyes darting, breathing shallow. Outside, the sky had darkened even though it was still afternoon. Clouds churned unnaturally. Shadows stretched at angles that made no sense. As they reached the car, every streetlight flickered. Marcus turned to John. "We shouldn't go back there." "We have to," John said. "We can't run. We remember now. And it's following us. If we don't end this, it will never stop." "How?" Marcus asked. John opened his jacket and pulled out the leather journal. Inside, new words had appeared, bleeding through the blank pages like ink from another world. "Only the forgotten can be consumed. Remember the name. Speak it. Burn it. Sever the root." They drove back to the house. The Traeger house. It stood the same way it always had, but different now. Like it knew they were coming. Windows wept condensation on the inside. The front door had cracked slightly open, waiting. The air tasted of metal and old leaves. Inside, the house greeted them with silence so loud it made John's teeth ache. Every creak of the floorboards beneath their feet felt rehearsed, like they were walking across a memory already played out. In the living room, the fireplace was lit, but no one had touched it. The flame burned black and blue, and shadows danced without sources. They walked past it, toward the stairs, up to the attic, up to where it all began. The door opened on its own. The attic was the same. The circle, drawn on the floor in chalk, the melted candles, the scraps of paper, still untouched, as if time had frozen this room while the world outside moved on. Marcus stepped into the center of the circle. "What's the name?" John's hands trembled as he opened the journal. The page was filled. Now, one word repeated again and again in larger and larger script until it nearly tore through the paper. Laven. The moment John spoke it aloud, the house screamed. Not sound, but space itself recoiled. The walls shook, the light shattered. And from the shadows the shape emerged. It wasn't Denny, it never had been. It was a mimic, a fragment, a parasite of sorrow birthed by generations of silence. Its voice poured into the room like oil. "You called me again," it hissed. "You wanted to forget, but you brought the name back. And now it will bind you forever." John stepped forward. "No, we brought it back to kill you." Marcus struck a match and dropped it into the center of the circle. The flames erupted, not with heat, but with memory. Every moment John had. Ever buried surfaced at once. His fear, his guilt, the night he told his mother, the sound of Denny screaming, the look on Marcus's face, the day he ran away from the ritual. The fire roared higher. The creature flinched. "Remember!" John shouted. "We were just kids. You made us forget so you could feed. But we remember now. We remember it all." The creature howled as its shape unraveled, threads of shadow peeling away like smoke. The attic bent inward, gravity twisted, light spun into a spiral. Marcus grabbed John's hand. "Now!" Together they stepped into the circle and spoke the name again, louder, firmer, over and over, until the room shattered like glass. And then nothing. Silence. Stillness. John opened his eyes. He was lying in grass, outside, in daylight. Birds sang. The house was gone. No ruins, no debris. Just an empty lot. Next to him, Marcus sat up slowly. "Did we die?" he asked. John shook his head. "I don't think so. I think we ended it." "How do we know?" Marcus looked around, searching for proof, doubt already creeping in. John held up the journal. All pages were blank again, truly blank. Not a single word. Not even the name. He smiled faintly. "Because I can't remember what we were fighting." Marcus froze. "You don't remember?" "Only you," John said. "And the feeling that we survived something we shouldn't have." "That's how we know it's over," Marcus whispered, "because forgetting is the only way to heal." They stood. The wind was warm. A group of kids rode their bikes down the street, laughing, free. John looked at them and felt something strange. Peace. As they walked away from the empty lot, John turned one last time. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a boy in a red hoodie watching from the other side. But when he blinked, the space was empty. Maybe it always had been. Maybe memory plays tricks. Maybe some doors should stay closed. And if you've come this far into the story, remember this. Some ghosts are born not from death, but from silence. If this story gave you chills, if it made you think twice about the shadows in your own past, consider subscribing for more stories like this. Hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good mystery, and remember, some truths wait. In the dark, hoping you'll remember. Let's just hope they never find you first.